Okay, we've got nice numbers on now. So let's drive forward. So first of all, I'm just going to share a screen into a couple of slides. So there we are, screen sharing. So strategic thinking for agile leaders. This is number 5 in a series of 5. There are going to be further webinars occurring, probably fortnightly rather than weekly. Give you a chance to actually digest what's being said rather than bombarding me loads of information. So yes, there are going to be further webinars starting in June, which I'll come on to towards the back end of this one. But this is the last specifically about leadership, and this one's about strategic thinking for agile leaders. Tooling familiarization, for those of you who haven't been to the webinars before, I think it's relatively straightforward. Your microphone is automatically turned off, so don't worry, if you're saying anything, don't worry, you won't be making a noise. Please feel free to raise a hand at any point. I can answer a question from a raised hand, or more usually what people prefer to use is chat. Now, when you use the chat, if you set your chat setting to all panelists and attendees, it means that everybody can see what you're raising. So if I could just ask a few of the people just to go on to chat and just say hi to everybody, so I can see that most of you have got the idea of using chat. So I can see 4 or 5 already there. Fantastic stuff. Hi, David, Charlene. Fantastic. Mario, Francis, Rui. Hi. Fantastic. Good to see you all. I recognise some of the names from previously, so that's fantastic. And welcome to all the new folks. Brilliant. All right, so let's drive on. So yes, apologies to those of you who've been at previous webinars, but I just need to do some brief introductions again. So yes, my name is Pete Measey. I'm chairman and founder of a company called RadTac. That was founded in '98. RadTac's a multi-million-pound worldwide organisation specialising in agile transformation, specialising in agile training, basically everything agile, everything related to agile. I personally started in the industry, IT industry, in 1983. Since then, since 1994. I really moved more into working in what is now known as agile. Obviously, the term agile came from 2001. However, a few of us were sort of like doing this sort of thing when it was called RAD in the old days. So these frameworks, Scrum, etc., Lean software development, they used to be called RAD frameworks back in the day, and that's actually why RadTac is called RadTac, Rapid Application Development, Training and Consultancy. So that's sort of my background. So I'm certified in all sorts of stuff, certified Scrum trainer. I won't bore you with all of that sort of stuff. Ex-director of an organisation called the DSGM Consortium, a non-for-profit organisation. One of the early agile approaches, really good stuff. That has since morphed into the Agile Business Consortium, which some of you may have heard of. Lead author editor of the Agile Foundations book, which you can see on this slide here. Fellow of the Agile Business Consortium, no great surprise there. Really, my specialist area is business agility. An ex-adjunct professor, so lecturer of Agile Project Management at Hull University. So that's a bit of an introduction of myself. So these are the webinars which we've run up to this point. This one's going to be looking at really habits of strategic thinkers. So a few models. There's loads of models thinking about strategic thinking. Let's have a few, some of which may be more suited to an agile world, some of which may be less suited to an agile world, but we'll have a look at some of those. One of them is from an organization called SMOE, SMOE Strategic Models, so we'll have a look at that. Real-time strategic change, so thinking about strategy, but also thinking about the need to evolve as we move forward. We'll have a look at that. Emotional intelligence, we talked about emotional intelligence sort of part 1 in the webinar last Wednesday. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence part 2. So really thinking about more social intelligence, what you need to have in place to think about strategically which way do you need to take the business or the program or the project or whatever it is. Boundary mapping, yep, thinking about how we do that, culture boundary mapping, organizational boundary mapping, that sort of good stuff, and creating safe environments for innovation and creativity. So this is really the sort of stuff we'll be looking at today. I'll come back to the webinars occurring after this a little bit later on. So just a quick introduction for why business agility. We looked at this really in webinar 1 in detail, so I'm not planning to look at it in detail here again. If you really want to see this, please have a look at webinar 1, which is available on the internet. I just want to make the point, as I have on all the webinars, it's really a VUCA world nowadays. Well, nowadays, sadly, with the COVID-19 nightmare, it really is a VUCA world. And VUCA stands for, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Certainly the markets which RadTax operates in worldwide, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We couldn't define up front, this is exactly what we need to do in detail, and then that wouldn't stay correct for very long. So we can produce high-level strategic plans, which we'll look at later on, but they're going to need to evolve because the world is changing all the time. So it's a VUCA world. There's nothing wrong with traditional approaches like waterfall, etc. I personally haven't used them for 25 years. I'm not saying that that's because they're bad. I'm saying that they're not suited to the sorts of environments I work in, business transformation, that sort of thing. So it's a VUCA world. Yeah, sadly, the COVID-19 nightmare has, probably shown us that very, very clearly. And also, why business agility? Well, some of you may have heard of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, I'm going to try and run a YouTube clip. So just bear with me. Good old technology. This may or may not work. The YouTube clip is only about 1.5 minutes for those of you who've seen it before. For those of you who haven't seen it before, I think it's a good overview of what the fourth industrial revolution is. So just bear with me. I'm going to stop the share on here. I'm going to take myself over to the slides, fire that off, stop that video. Of course, it's quite complicated, isn't it? Stop that video. I am then going to go back into Zoom, share the screen in the video, and hopefully this will work. Anyway, let's give this a go, see if it works. There we go. So the fourth industrial revolution, it's just an overview of what this is all about, really. But I think it's a really good overview. Yeah, that's my experience. So some of you might have heard of Taylorism, which is an approach that we used in those days. This is when really I started coming into business. Started in IT. I know I only look about 20, obviously. That's what I first started. So this is the new world. Access technology is spreading like wildfire. Excuse me. Yeah, business models. So agile business models is what we need to do with the VUCA world and to do with the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah, so that's broadly the end of that. So excellent. I hope you enjoyed that. It's just a brief overview of what I mean when I'm talking about the fourth industrial revolution. I suppose this isn't coming down the line. It has come down the line. So we need to make sure that we've got the ability to deal with this. The video you just saw there was from the World Economic Forum. So many organisations are talking about this. So just in synopsis, if I may, business agility. Why do we need it? There's loads of reasons and loads of economic reasons, value delivery reasons, but we need to align into the fourth industrial revolution. This is coming whether we like it or not. It's already here, and we need to have those new business models, those agile business models, and also markets, or the majority of markets nowadays are VUCA, and agile is specifically designed for VUCA markets: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So just a little overview there of why we need business agility. As I say, look at webinar 1 if you want more information on that. So habits of strategic thinkers. What do strategic thinkers generally show? So this is the first time I'd like to go over to you, if I may. So what do you think the key habits of strategic thinkers are? If you can put some comments on chat, that would be absolutely fantastic, and I'll read some out as they come up. If you have any views on this. Sometimes people do, sometimes people don't, and also it gives me a chance to have a drink of my juice. Yeah, Karthik, you can find the webinars on the RadTac YouTube channel, or just send me an email and I'll point you to them. Keeping up to date with market trends, Marnus. Yeah, certainly. Active listening and response, Francis, definitely. Yeah. Visionary thinking, Jasbir, yeah. Focus on business outcomes, strategic objectives, Damien, yes. Forward thinking, Sean, yeah. There's some really good stuff here as normal. Whenever I do these webinars, I'm always absolutely over the moon with the comments that come out. Steward leadership, Karthik, yeah, brilliant, fantastic stuff. Yeah. So yeah, end-to-end thinking, yes, or systems thinking, perhaps end-to-end or systems thinking. We talked a bit about systems thinking in webinar 4, and I think we did in 1 as well. So yes, absolutely. Ability to pull themselves out and see the big picture, definitely. We'll talk about that. Outcome-driven innovation, absolutely. You know, within Agile, we talk about delivering outcomes, delivering value regularly. So outcome-driven innovation, yes. Design thinking, we'll have a look at in that context. Engagement of all stakeholders, yes. We'll have a look at that as well. Brilliant. Okay. Good. Yeah, using metrics and facts to make better decisions. Yeah, definitely. Certainly something we need to be doing. Great stuff. Okay. So as usual, some really great comments there. So I'm going to look at some models. There's lots of these. So we're going to be looking at some strategic modeling ideas. What the strategists, what habits do they do, what models do they do? Just before we get into this, I mean, I've shown a few models in previous webinars. Just want to make the point that this is a statement from George Box, a statistician from 1978. All models are useless, if I remember rightly. There we go. All models are wrong, should I say, but some are useful. Yeah, that's sort of my experience. You know, we use lots of models in RadTac to think about transformation and all that sort of good stuff. But we need to recognise that there's no specific one model that has all the answers. But some of them are going to help us. So just before we get in there, let's just have a look at a few definitions. Now, rather than just pulling something off the internet or something, I've written some definitions here from sort of my perspective. So I'm not saying they're definitively right. I'm saying that this is what I would see as the definitions of these things. So vision. What's a vision? The generally evolving direction of travel to achieve an outcome. I would see that as a vision. So in other words, an example of that would be, we want to explore other planets. It's unlikely to change much, but could if funding is reduced drastically, for example. Yeah, it could change if, we might decide not to explore other planets. We're going to explore the bottom of the sea, maybe. So that could happen, but it's unlikely. The mission, excuse me. What are we aiming for at the moment within our vision? In other words, we want to land a person on the moon as the mission. Within the vision, we want to explore other planets. This might change if it turns out the moon's made from cheese or something totally unexpected. We might go, whoa, right, we haven't got something that can land on cheese. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go Mars or Venus with an unmanned probe or something like that. So yeah, the mission could certainly change. Strategy, the sort of thing we're going to be talking about here in more detail. Broadly, how are we going to synthesize everything together that we need to achieve the mission? So the mission is, we want to land a person on the moon. So the strategy is, how are we going to build the rocket, identify and train astronauts, etc., etc., etc. This will change pretty regularly, actually, the strategy, based on what we learn. We're working in a VUCA world. We need to get feedback fast. As we get feedback, our strategy quite rightly should be changing direction within the mission. And then tactics, excuse me, what value are we focused on delivering now that has a determined outcome in a short time frame? So as one of our friends was saying, outcomes, thinking about outcomes, yes, determined outcome in a short time frame. In other words, create and deliver avionics training for astronauts. This is going to change all the time as we understand more about what the astronauts need, what the astronauts know, what's their skill set, what are the complementary training we're going to use, how's the design of the rocket occurring. So these are going to change all the time. So we can see here sort of 4 different levels: vision, mission, strategy, and tactics. And we're sort of starting to think that the vision level, things are going to change, but probably not very often, whereas at the tactics level, they're going to change all the time. And strategy and mission, yeah, they're going to change. They're going to change some of the time, but they all feed each other. They all feed each other. Our strategy needs to be very strongly fed from the tactics and from what we're actually doing. Okay, so this is the first of our models I'd like to have a look at. This is from 2 people called Keeling and Arnold. This is one that I've used over the years because quite a lot of this looks quite familiar to me. We sort of talked about managing thoughts, cultivate clarity of expression, cultivate calmness of mind. We talked about this in our webinar 4 when we were talking about things like mindfulness, when we were talking about things like how to develop ourselves personally as an agile leader. So yes, this sort of resonates with me over the years. So yeah, just a quick look at what this is saying. So as a strategic leader, or habit of a strategic leader, we need to be getting into the game. We don't want to just keep doing the same routine again and again. If you remember webinars 1 through 4, we've talked about the RATAC Agile Transformation value, which is we value transformational leaders over transactional managers. We will still need transactional managers, but we really value transformational leaders, because if we're operating in a VUCA world, everything needs to evolve. So we need to get into the game. Embrace confusion and contradictory thoughts. Yeah, it's a VUCA world. Was it Confucius? The only constant in life is change. I'm not sure whether that was Confucius or not. I think it was. Yeah, that's been my experience. Certainly in business, that's been my experience. The only thing you can rely on is that things are going to change all the time. So yes, we need to have the ability to embrace confusion, embrace change. Think about contradictory thoughts, think about how to get those contradictory thought processes into our strategy. We need to have the ability to evolve the strategy based on what's happening at the tactical level, all the good stuff we were talking about a minute ago. Cultivate calmness of mind. I won't go through that again in any great detail. That's exactly the sort of thing we were talking about in webinar 4, same as manage your thoughts. And cultivate clarity of expression. Yes, I mean, if we're strategic leaders, agile strategic leaders, we must have the ability to express our strategy. We must have the ability to express our mission, or even express our mission. And I've done this many times over the years. When I first started in working in transactional change, transformational change, I started using visualization practices very, very early, 25, 30 years ago. I remember working with a major airline. I won't name which one, but this is probably about 25 years ago, 28 years ago, a very famous major airline. I was involved with the transformation team there, transforming how their engineering capability worked, their worldwide engineering capability worked. And the way we actually cultivated that clarity of expression is we produced some cartoons, basically, which we were able to put up around the walls. And what we did was people like myself ran people from the engineering part of the airline through these cartoons. So rather than sending them loads of documentation, we actually ran people through cartoons placed on the walls, which were then left on the walls, take about half an hour, 45 minutes to run people through, pretty complex ideas. So very, very visual. So visual thinking is a key thing within RATAC's thinking, and it's certainly a key thing within Agile. So yeah, that's one model that we've seen over the years. It seems to be pretty powerful. So a couple of questions here. By model, do we refer to strategy thinking model? Yes. These are sort of like strategy thinking models. And do agile leaders need more tactical or strategic thinking? Excellent question. Absolutely brilliant question. Both. Because I'll talk about this. I'll talk a bit about planning. I'll talk a bit about what's called baseline planning and commitment planning, which I've talked a bit about in previous webinars, but I'm going to draw a few pictures around this area, because as a leader, if we're working within an organization that has dependencies, for example, or it has, we need to think about when we're going to bring people in to do things, or we need to think about when to employ resources, or we need to, whatever. We're going to need to think further down the line than just the next sort of 2-week sprint. So yes, we need to think tactically and strategically. But we also need to recognize in the agile world that it's a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That means is the more VUCA the environment is that we're operating within, the more pointless it is to plan further into the future. So we need to recognize that as well. So another one. Again, I like Shoemaker because once again, a lot of this looks familiar to me. Yeah. So anticipate. We need to be thinking about, or one of the habits, of strategic thinkers, they're anticipating what's going on. We need to have peripheral vision, which we'll have a look at in a concept that we have a look at a little bit later on. But yes, we need to have the ability to understand what the market's doing. We need to have the ability to understand who our stakeholders are. We need to have the ability to understand who our personas are. So in other words, which people are likely to be using whatever outcome it is we're creating, and what are they interested in. So there's lots of things we can look around that sort of area. In fact, we train a lot of this stuff in our product owner training. Thinking critically. So critical thinking doesn't mean, saying, oh, that's rubbish, this is rubbish, that's rubbish. Critical thinking means asking questions. It's meaning, you know, whenever we look at a certain idea, we need to critically analyze it, question everything. So yeah, it's another habit of strategic thinkers in my experience. Interpret. A good strategic leader holds steady, synthesize information again, many sources before developing a viewpoint. Yeah, we're looking at a strategy here, which is going to be over a period of time, you know, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, whatever makes sense. Remembering the point I made about VUCA, we're looking at a strategy here. So we're really setting a direction of travel within the mission, within the vision. So yeah, we need to be confident that this what we're defining here is going to hold steady-ish. It's going to change, obviously, we're working in a VUCA world, but it's not going to change out of all recognition. This is a biggie, number 4. Sadly, I've seen this at many organizations that I've interacted with. You know, some organizations, they almost think we need to make a decision on something. So let's have a meeting to figure out what decisions we need to make before we make the decision on something. And hold on a minute, we need to have a few meetings to think about how we make the decisions to make the decision on something. Yeah. Or they spend a huge amount of time analyzing whether this thing will or will not work. My guidance to them is nearly always, look, the only way you're going to know whether something actually adds value and the only way you're going to know whether something works or not is by doing it. So use a concept from something called Lean Startup. If you haven't heard of this concept, I would suggest a book, Lean Startup. The book is called Lean Startup by a guy called Eric Ries, R-E-I-S-S, Eric Ries, Lean Startup. He talks about experiment and pivot. So if we're in an environment that we're a startup organization or we're doing a startup project or a startup product outcome development, whatever it is, it's a good idea to run some experiments and then based on the feedback from those experiments to pivot, to then change direction based on that real world scenarios, real world feedback. So notice we're not doing analysis paralysis. Alignment, we need to make sure that we identify who all the stakeholders are. We need to make sure we've got alignments across all the stakeholders, absolutely key. And then basically learn. So, you know, honest feedback is a really hard thing to gain, or that's my experience anyway. A lot of this comes down to how we as leaders interact with the people in our organization. You know, sadly, it can be quite easy for us to get a bit shouty, perhaps sometimes. You know, things aren't aligning into our mental model, the sort of thing we were talking about in webinar 4. You know, things are outside our mental model. That sounds wrong to us. If we sort of have that attitude, people are never going to give us honest feedback. We need to be very open to feedback, and we need to react to feedback in a way that's positive. All the stuff we talked about in webinar 4. So yeah, thinking critically, for example, if you remember in webinar 4, when we looked at the fourth industrial revolution, I talked there a bit about what is really valued in today's world as opposed to what was valued in 2015. And I don't know if you remember, but critical thinking was very much up the list for 2020. It was relatively low in 2015. It's now very high on the list. So again, the sorts of habits we see here, strategic thinking habits from Shoemaker, yeah, they resonate with me. They resonate with my real world experience, and they also resonate with the other things we've been talking about. Another model which resonates very strongly with me. This is the one I was talking about before, SMOE, the Centre for Management and Organisation Effectiveness, CMOE, SMOE. Yeah, so looking at this one, wow, this looks really agile. So we're going to learn, we're going to think, we're going to act. We're going to learn, we're going to think, we're going to act. Learn, think, act. Learn, think, act. Oh, that's interesting. So we're going round and round and round that iterative cycle. Oh, interesting. So we're starting to get sort of iterative strategies here. Where are we now? Current position. Formulate and define intentions, the path forward, as we've suggested. Where are we going to future positions? So act, boldness, courage, discipline, flexibility, agileness. Yeah. And then past experience and results based on where we've moved to. Learn, discover the patterns and learn from history. That will then aid us to think about what our new current position is. Then we can define the future position, then we can move, then think about the current position, future position, move, think about the current position, future position, move. Yeah, the Deming cycle. Yeah. The sort of stuff we talk about on agile courses, learn, plan, build, do, measure. So this is a very agile style cycle that we're seeing here, an agile strategy thinking model. Where is it used? Well, in the Being Strategic model, as this model is known, well, really everywhere. Applied strategic thinking, strategic teaming, staying ahead of the curve by thinking strategically, thinking about planning resources into the organization and people into the organization. highlighting to everybody that strategy is really everybody's job. Everybody should have a voice to say this is the direction of travel we should be taking. Everybody should be feeding back to the strategy. It's only via real world feedback coming back to the strategy as an agile strategy person that we're going to be confident that strategy is robust. So yes, some interesting points there, hopefully. So again, I would recommend you to have a look at this. Offline. Yeah, brilliant. So a few of the folks here, Alabetta Karthik, are saying the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, excellent book. Yeah, totally agree with that. I would suggest in Yorkshire what we would say a right riveting read. It's a right riveting read. It's definitely worth looking at. Another one. Again, I'm not planning to go through this in detail. I just really wanted to show the sort of alignment again between what the key strategic thinking models and the sort of stuff we see in Agile. So what we are seeing here from Jacobs on the left is starting from the top, the sorts of things you would have in a strategy. So tools and techniques would be the basic step. Phases and steps of work, thinking about that strategically, would be the next step up. Principles of strategic thinking would be the next step up. The approach to change, strategic change, would be the next step up. The ways of thinking and acting would be the next step up, basically leading to the way of being. Yeah. So it's sort of, as we can see here, the arrows are saying increased flexibility, decreased visibility as we go from top to bottom, and to the way around as we go from bottom to top. Now that's very similar to what we talk about in RadTac when we're talking about what we call the Agile Onion. So the Agile Onion is basically saying, tools and processes, just using an Agile tool, Jira or whatever, doesn't mean you're Agile. It just means you're using some Agile tooling, which is good, but it doesn't mean you're Agile. Just doing a practice like daily scrums, I recommend that's a really good idea, but it doesn't mean you're Agile. It just means you're doing daily scrums. Being physically or virtually co-located, again, doesn't mean you're Agile. It's a good idea, but it doesn't mean you're Agile, etc., etc. What does mean you're Agile is when the Agile mindset is in place. So again, we've talked about this through all the webinars. Agile is really about being Agile. What we can see here at the bottom of this, pyramid. Agile is really about being Agile rather than doing Agile. So again, I find this model relatively easy to communicate when I'm out there in the real world, because it sort of aligns into the sort of stuff we talk about in Agile anyway. So another model. This is something I used to use back in the day, really. It's based on some work by a dude called Galbraith. It's good, solid stuff. It's good, solid thinking. 1977, the original Galbraith 5-star model was produced. This is an evolution of that 5-star model. So I've got this one in here. It's good stuff. It's robust, but nowadays maybe a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Perhaps it's too detailed. It's too robust. I'll leave you to make up your own decisions. But So the point here is there's lots of different strategy models out there. As an agile thinker, when thinking about strategy is essential. Strategy is essential. But what we need to be doing is whatever model or models we're going to use in our strategic thinking, we need to be able to explain them easily in an agile way. And these ones that we've looked at here, my experience is that it's relatively easy to explain these in an agile way, especially that one, because that is an iterative agile cycle. This is relatively easy. This is more difficult, and I don't use this one. Very, very rare I use this one nowadays, but I have in the past, and it's good, robust stuff. So, just as a little run through there of a few models. There's a lot more than those as well. But these are the sorts of habits that you would expect to see in strategic thinkers. What we then need to think about is how do we ensure that they operate in an agile way. So just before we get there, another quick question for you. As the VUCA environment increases in magnitude, strategy and plans need to change more frequently and not continuously, which is my experience what happens in the market. In the context of the strategic models, what we just looked at there, how does this impact on or change your current organization's thinking about strategy? The fact that we need to be thinking about strategy in an evolutionary, iterative way. How does that change your current organizations? Again, I'll go on to chat and just see what people are raising and see if anybody's got any real world comments. Oh, a few guys have gone. Yep. So we need to think about, embracing new ways of working and how we actually enable people to embrace new ways of working. My practical experience on that is when we're implementing new ways of working, do it in small vertical slices. So do it across small value chains so we can actually show the tangible benefit from the new way of working. We then go to the rest of the business and we say, look, here are the tangible benefits in this business of working in this way. We can then think about doing another vertical slice, then another one, then another one. We've got half a chance we'll be able to change the business. So embracing new way of working to physiological safety, and I would also suggest psychological safety. Yes, investors, certainly we need to get investors on board with what we're doing. A wider understanding of flexibility across the wider organisation beyond the development team. Yeah, and what we're talking here about is business agility. So yes, definitely. Arguably, is it going to give us any benefit just the IT team doing Agile? Well, in my experience, yes, it will. But will it give us significantly more benefit if one vertical slice of the business, maybe in a bank, home buying and mortgages or something? So everybody, so the HR part of that part of the business, the marketing of that part of the business, the IT of that part of the business, if we communicate to them systems thinking and agile thinking, all that sort of good stuff, then it's going to be a lot more powerful as a transformation than it would be if we were just doing it in one part of the organization. It's all about getting value and getting feedback on value. So again, some great suggestions there. Thank you very much. So let's have a look at real-time strategic change. Just to remind ourselves of something from the Agile Manifesto. By the way, if some of you are not aware of the Agile Manifesto, very quickly, the Agile Manifesto, we talked about in detail in webinar 1. The Agile Manifesto is really the definition of what Agile is. People bandy this term Agile around. It's the manifesto that defines it. Now, the Agile Manifesto is actually called the Agile Manifesto for Software Development, but nowadays, just replace the word software with outcome, I would suggest, and it becomes really a manifesto for everything within the Agile world. Has 4 value statements in the Agile Manifesto. One of them is we've come to value responding to change over following a plan. Okay, let's have a look at this. So thinking strategically and thinking from a planning perspective, I'm going to go and draw a few pickies. So let's just go and share the appropriate screen. Just bear with me a minute. Just going to my drawing pad. There we go. Okie dokie. You should now be seeing a drawing screen. So brilliant. Let's have a look at what I'm talking about here. So I want to put over the idea of commitment plans and baseline plans. And to do this, I'm going to talk about a concept of what's called Boehm's cone of uncertainty. Boehm is Barry Boehm, who some of you might have heard of. Barry Boehm is he's basically one of the early instigators actually of Agile. He produced something called the spiral method in the 70s and 80s, and spiral is like a very early evolution of nowadays of what we call Agile. So the cone of uncertainty, Boehm basically applied his thinking to this in 1986. The cone of uncertainty certainly isn't a new idea, but let's just build on this. So what is the cone of uncertainty? Well, the cone of uncertainty looks at knowledge against the accuracy of an estimate. Knowledge against the accuracy of an estimate. So over here, we know very, very little about something. Over here, we know lots and lots about something. What we need to think about is what's the implication? What's the implication for that? So Peter's just making a point here. It's not actually an Agile Manifesto, but the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. That is true. The manifesto itself is not Agile. I would suggest it is. Fine. People have different opinions on these things. I would suggest that the manifesto sort of like gives a definition of a useful definition of agility. There is more in Agile, obviously, than just what's in the manifesto. Lots of practices, etc., etc. But the foundation of what agility is, I think, is pretty well described there. But you absolutely have your own opinion. So knowledge. Over to the right-hand side, we know lots and lots. Over to the left-hand side, we know very little. So all the cone of uncertainty does is basically is this. So what this is saying to us is, over here on the left, we know very, very little about this thing we're just about to estimate, this high-level strategic idea. So we can still give an estimate, but the accuracy of that estimate is going to be pretty wide, yeah, because the cone of uncertainty is pretty wide. In other words, we don't know a lot about this. Over here, we do know a lot about this thing here. So we know lots and lots. We've done it lots and lots of times before. Therefore, our cone of uncertainty is a lot narrower. Therefore, we can be more confident that the estimate we're going to make is going to be more accurate. So let's think about this in the context of planning, strategic planning, commitment planning, baseline planning, all this sort of good stuff. Now, we need to give some sort of indication of the direction of travel, and not always, and hopefully we wouldn't have to do this, but not always, but very regularly, we're going to need to give an indication of either the detailed quality of the product, or when it's going to be produced, and or what the cost of producing it is, and or etc., etc. So let's look at this. Now, for commitment plans, so somewhere down here, Prince2, for example, Prince2 is a project management approach. Within Prince2, it talks about commitment plans as being at the work package level. So a work package, sorry, is around 1 to 5 days. So the suggestion there is, or the implication there is, that what we're going to be doing is looking at a very short time frame, 1 to 5 days. We understand a lot about this, therefore the cone of uncertainty is pretty narrow, therefore we can be pretty accurate on the estimate. Out here, these are what are called baseline plans. So, the name baseline plan suggests this is just a baseline. To the best of our knowledge today, this is the baseline of this is the baseline of what we know. Yeah. Now, the term baseline plan suggests to us that it's going to change. Yes. Now, when doing baseline planning, there's lots of different ways to look at this baseline planning. But one way to look at this, if I looked at this in a more traditional way, what I would typically do, using the good old time cost quality triangle, what I would be doing here is I'd be looking at the functional quality, the time, the cost, and the technical quality. And what I would typically be doing in a traditional approach is I would be fixing the functional quality in detailed specifications. And therefore, if I get hit by any variability, if I get hit by any VUCA, yes, what's going to vary is either my technical quality, my time, or my cost. So that's one way to look at things. Yeah. Agile, we've given a definition of Agile in previous webinars. Agile is about continuously delivering value on a fit for purpose basis. Yes. You may or may not be delivering Agile outcomes to a particular date. I mean a date, 2 months, 3 months, 4, 6 months down the line or whatever. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you do, what you would be doing there is you would basically turn this triangle on its head. So you would fix the time and the cost. You would largely fix the technical quality. What you would be varying is the functional quality, because there's lots of different ways to deliver things. So in other words, silly example I've used before, I think on the webinars, silly example. If a client said to us, we want something that goes from A to B, we want it in 3 months, we want it for $200,000, and we think, okay, broadly that's probably going to be a bicycle. We're not going to figure out in detail exactly what a bicycle is, but it's broadly a bicycle, not a rocket ship. It's not a Formula One car, it's something broadly like a bicycle. To deliver those 20 outcomes, we could either produce a child's bicycle made of balsa wood with wood wheels, etc. That would take us 2 weeks and cost us £100, $100. Or we could produce an Olympic velodrome bicycle for Bradley Wiggins or Chris Hoy to win the Olympics on, hopefully, to win the Olympics on. That would take us 2 years and cost us $500,000. Somewhere between those 2 points, but both of those outcomes both of those deliveries have got 20 outcomes. Yes, they've both got wheeled as an outcome, they're both, etc., etc. But one would take 2 weeks and cost £100. One would take 2 years and cost £500,000. So we've got that flexibility there. And that's one of the reasons why we don't produce very, very detailed specifications at the beginning of an Agile delivery, because we want to have that ability to change direction. So strategic planning. Can we do strategic planning in Agile? Yes, definitely. Unquestionably. Should we do strategic planning in Agile? Yes, definitely, if it makes sense to do so. If we are following an Agile style approach where we're not really looking at dates, what we're doing is continuously delivering value, rock and roll. That's really what we want to do, continuously deliver value on a fit for purpose basis. However, from experience of running a business and from experience of interacting with hundreds of businesses, if not more, over the many years I've been working. Many businesses need to look into the future over a period of time, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever makes sense, taking into account the VUCA. So yeah, the commitment plan level in Agile is the sprint, which is normally 2 weeks. There's ways of creating commitment sprints, which I haven't got time to go through at the moment. Excuse me. But that would be the commitment plan level. And then anything above that would be a baseline plan. The assumption is the baseline plan will change. So this is giving us an indication that our plans need to be changing and evolving over time based on feedback as we deliver small increments of value. And the small increments or releasable increments of value that should be produced are going to be produced, well, it could be it could be every day, it could be every week, it could be the end of the sprint, etc. But they need to be out there regularly. So we would typically think about program boards. This is a real program board. I won't name the client. On the left-hand side here, the green, the bright green, you can see are different teams. The blue you can see are technical stories. The red you can see are business stories. And this is, quite a complex thing we're looking at here, strategically all going the same direction within the program. What this is identifying very quickly and very, very easily is it's too complicated. It's not set up right. So, one of these, if you're visualizing in this way, visualizing the strategic thinking in this way, you can pick up pretty damn soon, like this highlights, that what we're doing isn't structured in an opportune way. So yeah, we typically do need to look into the future. We might be looking at product roadmaps, maybe, high confidence for the next quarter because all the teams would be involved in planning it. Medium confidence for the quarter after that, low confidence quarter after that. We don't really know the quarter after that. But what we are doing here is we're giving a high level roadmap of the direction of travel strategically to achieve what we want to achieve our mission. And we can also talk about what's been done in previous quarters. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, but because it is so important, all of this depends on the level of VUCA. There's no point doing this if everything changes every week. There's no point doing this. But in many circumstances, there is a big point of doing this. So let's move on. Design thinking. So again, I'm just really trying to pique your interest. Oh yes, sorry, Karthik. Boehm is B-O-E-H-M, Barry Boehm. Yes, as you suggested. Yes, on the chat there. Fantastic, thank you. So design thinking. This is certainly a concept I would suggest you have a look at. So this is the sort of, I suppose you might say, the standard slide for design thinking. The idea is you do some discovery work. You then interpret that discovery work. So you've talked to the stakeholders, you've done some persona analysis, all this sort of good stuff. You interpret that. You then ideation, generate ideas, refine the ideas. You then do experimentation, experiment and pivot. You then pivot, you evolve. Yes. So discover, interpret, ideate, experiment, evolve. Yes. So that's sort of like the standard design thinking idea. And we typically do a combination of divergent and convergent thinking. So we've got exploration, design thinking. So we explore, define, ideate, build, and test. So thinking about the problem. So we typically diverge out to a lot of ideas and then converge down on one or two ideas that we want to push forward. And then when we're thinking about the solution, we would then diverge, thinking about how to produce the solution, and converge. So we start to get to this idea, which is agile design thinking. So what we're looking at here is in the mid. I always think of this as like being a car shadow. I always think of this like cam belts driving a shaft, or a boat or whatever. So we've got two engines, and we've got the shaft in the middle there. So the shaft's the business, the shaft's the strategy. How are we driving forward? Yeah. Well, we need to be continually thinking about the problems that we need to be solving. We need to be continually thinking about evolving the strategy, evolving the mission, evolving the vision. We need to be discovering new things. We need to be very innovative. We need to be very creative. So that's driving round and round and round and round. And we also need to be delivering solutions. So that's driving round and round and round and round in the agile world, delivering continuous value, and they feed each other. So obviously the delivery and the solution is feeding back the real world feedback, and then we're looking at the ideas, etc., and discovering and innovating, being creative based on that feedback. So yeah, so agile design thinking. This is one of the high level principles that we suggested in webinar 2. Agile business leaders have a customer focus. Yeah, so we're very much focusing on customers We're doing human-centered design, strategic design, based on a discovery, problem identification, critical thinking, based on the sort of stuff we've been talking about. So yeah, so a little bit there on design thinking. So that's quite a big area we just went through in a couple of minutes. But I'd recommend you to have a look at design thinking and then think back to these slides. But design thinking is great, but in a VUCA world, we have to use it in an agile way. We do not want that turning into a waterfall. Oh, we'll spend 3 months doing discovery, 6 months doing interpretation, blah blah blah. We want to be very, very quick, and we want to react based on what's happening in the world. So I said I would have a look at some emotional intelligence stuff. We had a look at part of emotional intelligence in webinar 4. If you want to understand more about this, the guy I would suggest to start with is a guy called Daniel Goleman. He's the person who's most oft quoted around EQ. What we looked at in webinar 4, which is about personal development as an agile leader, is really self-awareness and self-management. So I think we had an interesting discussion about that in webinar 4. What we're going to be looking at here is more social competence. So social awareness and relationship management. Now, obviously, these are absolutely key for strategic thinking, because we need to be interacting with these social communities to pick up the information that we need to allow us to innovate, to be creative, to think about evolving our strategies, our missions, all that sort of good stuff. So let's have a look at some thinking around this area. I'll just do a quickie if it's okay with everybody. Not sure whether anybody will have any ideas on this one, but what social awareness techniques have you used previously, and what social awareness techniques, do you value? Again, if you can just go on to chat again, and if anybody's got any view on this, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, strengths analysis. Yeah. Sorry, Francis. Respond, not react. I'm not. Me being dim, I'm not sure what that relates to. So, if you want to contact me offline and ask that question, I'll be more than happy to talk through it. Yeah. Okay. So it looks like we've had a quick look at that. Okay. Oops, bear with me. Just need to move this over here. Just bear with me. I just need to stop this share just for a second. Pop. Close that down. And back to the share again. Sorry about that. It was just a Zoom getting its knickers in a twist a little bit there. So yes, social awareness techniques. Yeah, things like this really. So looking outward to learn about and appreciate others' perspectives. Now, if we're thinking about strategic mission values, we're thinking about producing outcomes for people. It's absolutely fundamental that we do this sort of thing. So again, I'm not planning to go through these things in detail. I'm not planning to just read out what's on the slide. We can see what's on the slide. And just to reiterate, if you want to see these slides again, I am recording this, so you'll be able to see all these slides if you look at the recording. I'll just pick up on one or two of them. Management by walking around. The idea is that management occurs by go see. So go and see the issue. Now that is normally evolved into what are called Gemba walks. Gemba meaning the actual place. A Gemba walk it's sort of like management by walking around, but it's not the same thing. Within a Gemba walk, we as agile leaders, we go to the equivalent of the shop floor. We go and see what's happening, and then we help deal with the problem. That's the key thing. We identify what's actually going on, and then we facilitate and coach solutions to those things. So yeah, we've got a few other ideas. Reverse mentoring. Yes, I do this quite regularly actually. So when I'm working in an organisation as a coach, I ask somebody in the organisation to coach me. So sort of reverse coaching or reverse mentoring. The one above that as well, I really like, and I recommend to many businesses. As agile strategic thinkers, as agile leaders, it's a good idea for us to have a sort of a work on the shop floor day. So it can be great fun. It's really great for creating relationships, and it does give the people who are defining the strategies an idea of what's actually really happening on the shop floor. So I typically recommend that. So yeah, Hakalu is an idea from Hawaii. Pure awareness, no emotion or judgment, sort of thing we looked at in webinar 4 again. So we need to have the awareness to understand what's going on around us, but we shouldn't let ourselves fall into the trap of having an emotional reaction to it because it doesn't align to our mental model. And we shouldn't really be judging what's going on. We need to be observing it and then thinking about what's the best thing to do. So let's have a look at a little bit of boundary mapping. Again, I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat because I can see a couple of points, or I can see people are raising a few points on chat. Pop, there we go. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, good stuff. Yes, that is actually Maslow's hierarchy of needs is actually quite similar to some work by a guy called Patrick Lencioni, which you might be interested in having a look at. Patrick Lencioni, Maslow's worth looking at. Gemba walk, yeah, absolutely, fantastic. So yes, Manoj, you identified Gemba walk as something that we do. Brilliant stuff. All right, so boundary mapping. There we go. Okay, so boundaries. Yeah, boundaries exist. We're going to have a look at some ideas of boundaries. And we're going to have a look at some strategic thinking, some strategic leadership to think about how to deal with boundaries. So again, this is very high level stuff, but just to sort of give you a taste. Different levels of boundaries. So vertical, levels of hierarchy or rank. Horizontal, function and expertise. Ooh, that sort of reminds us of what we were talking about in self-development as an agile leader. Vertical development, horizontal development, webinar 4. Oh, okay, so it all ties together. Diversity, gender, age, religion, absolutely essential to understand those differences. I was working with a mobile phone company years ago. Again, I won't name the company, but they had big problems because they didn't actually have smartphone capability in place at the right time. And smartphones took off very quickly. What interested me, looking at why that happened at a later point, I don't know if any of you can remember the smartphone app where you could have a glass of wine or a pint of beer on a smartphone. That sold a huge amount of smartphones to adolescent men because they wanted to go to the pub and show their mates, look, I'm drinking a pint of beer on my phone. Yeah. So yeah, gender, age, religion, absolutely key to understand the market and what the outcomes. And sometimes it's the surprises which are actually the things that sell. Geographic, physical locations, obviously. Stakeholders, yeah, there's my definition here of a stakeholder. Stakeholders are people and groups who can help us or screw us up. So we need to understand who they are, where those boundaries are. Yeah, again, not planning to just read the slide. I'll leave the slide up just for a few seconds so you can see it in the recording if you want to come back to this particular area. But there are different ways of dealing with those boundaries. Buffering, reflecting, recognize and appreciate group differences, build respect. Trust. The reason I have trust circled here is that just about in everything that I've ever read to do with this area and to do with building teams, it all starts from a foundation of trust. Lencioni, I mentioned, Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Yep, A Leadership Fable, that's the name of his book, A Leadership Fable, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, excuse me. He makes the point that before you can build anything else, same in Maslow, before you can build anything else, there needs to be trust within the team. So, as an agile leader, we need to build that trust into the team. So mobilizing, weaving, transforming, yeah. So, yeah. Culture mapping. This is from somebody called Maya. This is very, very interesting to me anyway. So it relates back to the point we have on here about geographic and diversity. So, yeah, culture mapping. This is looking at these key areas. So this was from Harvard Business Review. What they looked at is how different cultures deliver different things: communication, evaluation, leading, deciding, trusting, things like this. What I wanted to highlight on this diagram really is if, for example, by the way, there's no right or wrong here. It's just how these different cultures operate. If, for example, you look at Germany, the green line, they seem to have a very low context in communicating. They seem to value that. Direct negative feedback, yeah, they're happy with that, etc., etc. So fine, they're more happy with linear time, and they're more happy with being specific rather than persuading. You then map that to China, for example. Well, that appears to be on the other end of the scale. Now, the point I'm making here, the reason why this is so important when you're thinking about strategies is if you're implementing a strategy on a worldwide basis, then you need to understand this, because if you've got people from, let's say, Germany and people from, let's say, China, who are thinking about the same strategy, what strategic direction should be happening, they need to be cognizant of the fact that they will be interacting from a different premise. So it's absolutely essential to understand what this start point is. And quite regularly, I do actually use this. Obviously, I take the dots off, but I use this with teams that I'm interacting with, just if we are operating internationally, to get an idea of this sort of stuff. Relationship management. Again, I'll just leave this slide up again so we can see it. We're not far off the end of the webinar, so I'll leave this slide up so we can see it and come back to it if we want to. Some really good stuff here. I would suggest. Yeah, the sort of things we need to be. I mean, relationship management's a big subject, obviously, but you know, there's some. I would recommend have a look at these things: radical candor, catalytic conversations, etc., etc. So that really completes the loop. The 5 webinars that we've done: business agility, leadership, and we've sort of circled the loop there, closing the circle. I'm definitely not planning to go through these slides. We went through these slides on in webinar 1, but I'd just like to, you know, this is everything you're looking at here is RADTAC defined. This is what we've learnt over the years as what needs to be in place. For example, what leadership behaviours enable an agile operating model. So I'm not planning to read through them, but the sort of stuff we've been going through over the last 5 webinars, hopefully, as you're looking at these things, they'll resonate with you. This is why, well, practical, pragmatic experience, and also an awareness of what all the gurus say. This is why we have these things. This is why we have these things defined as they are. So leadership behaviours enable an agile mindset, etc. Unlock the, you know, top left, unlock the intrinsic motivation of great people, break the leadership myth. We've talked about the leadership myth a lot in webinar 3 and webinar 4, sorry. So yes, yeah, this again is RADTAC learning. We value these things. So, you know, thinking about the sort of value structure of the manifesto. Yeah, we value evolution over revolution. It's about agile and agile strategic thinking, and agile everything thinking is about evolution of value into the market. We don't want to do things in a revolutionary way. A, it's too risky, and B, it costs a hell of a lot of money. Systems thinking over silo mentality. We want to think end to end, the whole value chain. Agile leadership over traditional management, I mentioned a little bit earlier. And then empowered people over processes and tools. Yeah. So we talked about that in webinar 4. And just about the last slide. Yeah, the big 5 for transformation to business agility. Again, this is based on practical, pragmatic learning. Well, from me over the last 25, 30 years, and from RADTAC over the last 22 years. So I would suggest, you know, there's some good stuff here to have a look at, which is practical, based on that which we've been talking about. So just to totally close the circle, I haven't really. I've sort of been mentioning RADTAC all the way, all the way through all the webinars. So I suppose you know, it'd be a good idea to just give a quick overview of who we are. We're a consulting group. Empower our. Well, you can see what it says on the slide here. There's basically 4 key service areas in what we do. Learning and development. We have the largest portfolio of agile training in the world. Consultancy and coaching worldwide, and exemplar practitioners. So there's people who actually do the job on the ground. We also have a visual thinking and design thinking practice. So these are really the 3 key practice areas. We work with some of the biggest organisations in the world, across the world. Yeah, training portfolio there. Yeah, I'll not bore you with all the detail. Again, I'll just leave the slide up for a few minutes so you can come back to it. Certainly the UK's broadest and deepest Agile, Lean, DevOps and Design Thinking training portfolio, and probably the world's. We are a specialist organisation that specialises in Agile, Lean, Kanban thinking. So yeah, yeah, spread around the world, as I said. So yeah, all sorts of places. So just to round everything up, we're just about on the time limit for the webinar again. So I'm doing an additional webinar specifically about agile learning management, delivering in the post COVID-19 world of huge demand and restricted budgets. So, you know, RADTAC are and have been specialising in how to deliver training in complex environments for over 22 years. So I think I would suggest highlighting that to your learning management and HR people. And, you know, we're going to look at some interesting lessons there about how they can deal with this very changed world using agile thinking. And then the next 5, fortnightly from Tuesday, June the 9th. Yeah, again, I won't read all of those out, but this is what I'm focusing on at the moment. Hey, if any of you want to contact me, please, there's my email ID. There's Radtak's website ID if you want to find out more about us. If you'd rather I talked about something else rather than those 5, just highlight to me, and I'll certainly take it into account. But for now, once again, I'd just like to say thanks very much for all your input as you've been coming back on the chat. Fantastic to work with you all again. I'll just wait as usual. I'll just wait a little bit as people disappear from the webinar. Thanks, David, Rui, Perry.